Welcome, everyone. My name is Emma Shinall, and I lead the incentives team here at PowerFlex. We're really excited for all of you who are tuning in or joining us live that are interested in adopting some EV charging solutions at your organizations. And we feel really excited to introduce y'all to funding opportunities that will ultimately reduce your cost in meeting your EV charging goals. So, to go over what we're kind of going to flow through today, we're going to start out by giving just a general overview of who we are, what PowerFlex is, what we do, our history. Then we'll dive into the funding programs currently available in New York, and we will have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So, about PowerFlex. Who is PowerFlex? We are a clean technology solutions company making the transition to carbon-free electrification and transportation possible through things like EV charging, solar, storage, and intelligent energy management systems. So we help everyone from property developers, sustainability teams, operations teams, all the way to fleet managers, IT professionals, and drivers turn their sites into green energy hubs. So how do we do that? So PowerFlex has a suite of solutions that include commercial solar, energy storage, microgrids, and EV charging. And additionally, we also have, as I mentioned before, an intelligent energy management software called PowerFlex X, which is a system that helps our customers monitor and optimize their on-site energy assets and systems. So in addition to this suite of solutions I just went over, PowerFlex is also going to be your all-in-one provider from everything from site validations and project development all the way through the construction process and even post-construction through operations and maintenance. And the best part about all of this is that when you work with PowerFlex, you have one point of contact for all your clean tech solutions and products. So as I just mentioned, PowerFlex manages the project from start to finish. We're here as your partner to make sure that the project fits your needs, and all you have to do is press the on button at the end of the day. So I'd like to highlight just a few of the customers that we've been fortunate enough to deliver some of these clean energy solutions that I just went over. You may recognize some brand names and locations here. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with kind of PowerFlex's history, so PowerFlex is majority owned by EDF Renewables, and the EDF group holds over 70 years of experience in energy and then over 35 years of experience in renewable energy. So focusing specifically on EV charging, which is what we'll be talking about today, PowerFlex is the #1 provider of large-scale EV charging solutions, and we're the 4th largest public level 2 charging station network in the US. So we're really proud to have installed over 15,000 chargers and counting. That number is growing every week. All right, now we can dive into the fun stuff, the dollar signs, the funding. But there's a few things I want to note just to keep in mind as we go through some of these programs. The first thing is that every program is going to have a different, what we like to call eligible cost list. So every funding program decides what they will and will not cover with their funding that they issue to applicants. So we're not going to be diving too deep into those eligible costs and things like that today because they really do vary, and true estimates are very project specific. So the best solution to, if you really like what we talk about today and really want to see some dollar signs and estimates and how one of these funding programs may actually impact a project you may have in mind, the best thing to do is to reach out to sales@powerflex.com, and my team will help make that happen and give you a very specific, customized estimate based on your site, your needs, things like that. And additionally to that, we're going to go over a few programs where you actually have the ability to stack incentives. This is something that some programs allow and some don't. You'll see this nationwide. And though sometimes stacking incentives will impact what one program covers, that way, where one, touching on the second bullet, never going over 100% of eligible costs. So these funding programs are not designed to allow you to profit off of these applications and projects. You should never be in a scenario where you receive more than 100% of the costs that were actually incurred. So please keep that in mind. And most importantly, why we are all here today, what my team is for here at PowerFlex is PowerFlex will actually manage these incentive applications, all required documentation, all required coordination on your behalf. So Janelle in just a second is going to touch on some of the processes, eligibility, all this information. And you can be comfortable knowing that, yes, we're sharing this today, but we are also the experts on this and can really take the reins on monitoring and coordinating and managing all the things that we're going to cover today for you. That way you can really just focus on your EV charging goals and so forth. So now that I've prefaced those things, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Janelle Lindstrom, who is one of our EV incentive experts, to talk about funding programs in New York.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janelle Lindstrom. I'm one of the incentive experts on our San Diego team at PowerFlex. And today I will be going over the Joint Utilities of New York EV Make Ready program. So this is a very popular and lucrative program administered by many of the major utilities in New York State. Those include Central Hudson, Con Edison, National Grid, New York State Electric and Gas, or NYSEG, Rochester Gas and Electric, or RG&E, and Orange and Rockland. So applications are currently open and rolling until the end of 2025 or until budget is reached. So still have a good amount of time there. And the program covers up to 100% in incentives to cover the electrical infrastructure costs associated with preparing a site for EV charger installation. So if you look to the diagram on your right there, this just breaks down what is eligible for those make-ready incentives at the 50% to 100% level. I'll go over those shortly in the next slide. But this program covers utility and customer side make-ready infrastructure. So this includes panels, conduit, trenching, design, permitting, step-up transformers, wiring, and customer switchgear. One thing I do want to highlight is the program does not cover the actual EV charging units or their installation. They also do not cover any networking fees, maintenance, or signs or bollards. So that's just one important thing to remember. So some general eligibility requirements. This is a light duty program only. Construction must have commenced on or after July 16th, 2020. Sites must install a minimum of 2 plugs, and site capacity is limited to 3 megawatts. Con Edison is the exception there. They have up until 6 megawatts for a maximum site capacity. One thing to remember is the customers are expected to operate and maintain the chargers and provide station data to their corresponding utility for 5 years from the equipment activation date. Next slide, please. So now jumping into eligibility criteria. So your incentive award is determined by your eligibility tier. So you can receive up to 50%, up to 90%, or up to 100% in funding, depending if certain site criteria is met. One component factoring into this is whether your site is public or private. So for public access, this would just mean free access to charging for all EV owners during business operating hours. So you would not be able to charge an entrance fee or a fee for parking. However, you are able to charge fees for the actual vehicle charging. So that is an important distinction there. For private access, it's pretty self-explanatory, but this would just be for sites not open to the general public. So this includes light duty fleets, employee only parking, or resident only parking. There are certain criteria that can qualify a project for up to 100% in funding. This includes public DCFC projects located inside a disadvantaged community or within a 1 or 2 mile radius of a disadvantaged community. Also includes affordable MUD-L2 projects. So this would be buildings with 25% of units at or below 80% of the area median income. and also public curbside L2 projects within or adjacent to a disadvantaged community. So another important criteria point that factors into your eligibility tier is what plugs you install at your project. So installing standardized plugs, so the J1772 or the CCS plug will qualify you for those higher 90% and up to 100% tiers. Private sites or projects installing a greater proportion of proprietary plugs, so CHAdeMO or Tesla plugs, compared to standardized plugs will only qualify you for the lowest funding tier, which is at 50% tier. So these are all important things that factor into your eligibility tier. Next slide, please. So now jumping into funding. So each utility is allotted different budgets, which are reflected in different cost caps. So if you look to the chart on your right there, this is just a breakdown of all of your per plug and per kilowatt cost caps by utility. One important thing to know is that projects cannot receive an incentive higher than their eligibility tier multiplied by their estimated make-ready costs. So for example, if you are in the 50% tier and make-ready costs are $80,000, your incentive would be maxed out at that $40,000. So for eligible costs, this program covers utility and customer side make-ready infrastructure and their installation, also includes permitting, design and engineering, and project management. Batteries and load management systems are also eligible for incentives if they lower the utility service need. And another perk of the program is they do cover future proofing. This would be added on top of that base award, and they're offered at 10% of a project's total make-ready costs. So for example, if your total make-ready costs amount to $40,000, then your future proofing award would be 10% of that. So it would be an additional $4,000 that you could unlock. Next slide, please. Okay, so Con Ed deserves its own slide. They offer quite a bit higher cost caps here. So if you look at the up to 100% incentive tier, you can unlock up to $10,000 per plug as a base cost cap. Con Ed also offers a number of bonus incentives. This includes a speed bonus, which would be for projects that install their chargers within 6 months of signing the program agreement. It also includes a large project bonus. This would apply for projects installing 25 plugs or more up to 100 plugs. And another thing to note here is if your project qualifies for the up to 100% eligibility tier, then the 25 plug minimum is actually not required, and your project will automatically receive that higher incentive. So an important thing to note here, though, for the bonus incentives is they are only applied after the base cost cap has been surpassed. So in that, for example, the up to 50% incentive tier, you will need to incur enough eligible project costs to surpass that $5,000 per plug before any of these bonus incentives can even be applied. So for example, a quick calculation here, if you do have a publicly accessible MUD project installing 20 standardized L2 plugs with total make-ready costs of $100,000, first, this would qualify you for that 90% tier due to being publicly accessible and installing standardized plugs. So at the 90% level, you will unlock that $9,000 per plug. Multiplied by 20 plugs, that would put you at an eligible amount of $180,000. However, since your total make-ready costs are only $100,000, your incentive would be maxed out at that 90K, which would be that $100,000 times 90%. So if you want to unlock your full per plug funding amount, you need to be sure that you incur enough project costs in order to meet that baseline. Next slide, please. So the Joint Utilities also operates a medium and heavy duty EV make-ready pilot. Applications are accepted on a first come, first served basis until December 31st, 2025. The program is geared towards medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles with a special focus on sites in disadvantaged communities. So this program offers incentives up to 90% of utility side infrastructure costs and up to 50% of customer side costs. To qualify, a site must either be publicly accessible or participating in a qualified voucher incentive program. So this includes the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program, NYSERDA New York School Bus Incentive Program, New York City Clean Truck Program, the EPA Clean School Bus Program, and the EPA Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles Program. So the diagram to the right there just breaks down the types of incentives that you'd be eligible for. So again, to reiterate, if your site is publicly accessible, you would be eligible for that full 90% utility side cost covered and up to 50% of customer side cost covered. However, if your site is not publicly accessible, you are participating in a voucher incentive program, but your site is not located in a disadvantaged community, you would only be eligible for incentives covering up to 90% of those utility side costs only. So it is important to be sure that you meet all of the specific criteria in order to unlock that full incentive. Next slide, please. So now just to quickly go over funding. So again, utility side costs are covered up to 90%. And if your project does qualify for customer side make-ready incentives, they can receive up to 50% of the incentive baselines. So the chart to the right there just breaks down the incentive baselines by utility. And again, these are calculated by dollar per kilowatt. Next slide. And now just to wrap up with the general customer timeline, first stage would be the pre-application stage. So our team at PowerFlex, we have a design and engineering team that will work with you to scope the site, develop a preliminary site plan and design, and ultimately create an estimate of project costs. Our incentives team will work with those teams to gather required application documents and will submit the application on your behalf. That'll then put us into the next application stage. So the program administrators at your corresponding utility will review and approve the application. If there are any revisions or corrections needed, our team will jump in and handle all of those issues right away. So that takes one thing off your plate. If all gets approved, then the utility will send the funding agreement and we will send that to you for signature. After that is signed, the project will move on to installation. And once that's completed, our incentives team will collect and submit the final documentation for the incentive. Then the chargers will be operational and turned on. And once all of our final documentation is approved, then the program will issue payment. So the joint utilities has a 5-year compliance period where they do require every customer to submit quarterly data reports as in exchange for the incentive. Luckily, we do have an in-house compliance team that will handle all of those reporting needs for you, just to take another thing off your plate. So yeah, that about wraps up the program. It, again, is very popular and a lucrative program operated by many of the major utilities in New York State. Our team has worked very closely with program administrators from each utility and built a great working relationship. So if any issues ever do come up during the application process or construction process, we always work collaboratively and proactively together to get them resolved right away. So if you have any questions or any project-specific questions, please reach out to our sales team at sales@powerflex.com, and we'll be more than happy to get those answers for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Janelle.
Yeah.
I think we have time for just one or two questions. So I'll go ahead and read off the first, Janelle, if you want to take the lead on this. So I know today's webinar was really mostly focused on the state of New York. So does PowerFlex only work in New York, or will we complete and offer our solutions in other states as well?
Yeah, so PowerFlex is actually nationwide. We work in many different states, such as California, Arizona, Washington, Georgia, anywhere really. Our team will be there to jump in. So not limited to New York, we work nationwide.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well, for incentives specifically, our team does quarterly reviews to stay up to date on new incentives that are being offered nationwide in all states. And I want to say currently there's probably around I want to say 85% of the US is at least covered by one, if not more, EV incentive programs. So they're out there. We have our eyes on them. We're engaged with them. So yeah, definitely not limited to just New York. Alrighty, next question is going to be, what are some common challenges for organizations applying for clean energy funding, like some of the funding programs we went over today?
Yeah, so I would say a majority of the challenges come with incomplete applications or just knowledge gaps in available funding. We also can run into issues where required documents are not complete or they don't meet specific criteria. We found that programs have a lot of different nuances. So this is where it's helpful for our team to jump in. We do a lot of research prior to even submitting an application. So we're very well aware of all the criteria and requirements that need to be met. Um, and again, if any revisions or corrections are needed throughout the process, we already have built really good relationships with program administrators. So any issues usually are identified pretty proactively and in advance and get resolved very quickly due to that relationship that we have.
Yeah, completely agreed. Alrighty. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our webinar for today. Again, as myself and Janelle has mentioned, if you have any further questions, project-specific questions, or just want to know a little bit more about programs covered today or programs in other states, please reach out to us at sales@powerflex.com and we'll be happy to assist you. And in addition, you can kind of follow up on some of the things we talked about today by visiting our website and navigating to the policy hub, which has some information on incentive programs and the states where those incentive programs are that we're currently working with. And we'll also have kind of a contact route there if that sparks additional specific questions. So we want to thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.